It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. In Brighton, UK, the Labour Party conference for 2017 came to an end with its leader, Jeremy Corbyn's address.
Against all predictions, in June, we won the largest increase in the Labour vote since 1945. And achieved Labour's best vote for a generation. It's a result which has put the Tories on notice and Labour on the threshold of power. Yes, we didn't do quite well enough, and we remain in opposition for now. But we've become a government in waiting, and our message to the whole country could not be clearer. Labour is ready.
Joining us to discuss Corbyn's address is Leo Panitch. Leo is Senior Scholar and Professor Emeritus of Political Science at York University. He's the editor of the recently released 2018 Socialist Register titled Rethinking Democracy. Thanks for joining us, Leo.
Hi, Sharmini.
So, Leo, let's start with your initial reaction to Corbyn's speech.
It was a great speech, full of confidence. When he was first surprisingly elected leader just over 2 years ago, he wasn't used to being in the limelight in that way, and his speech was often halting. But he's a conviction politician, and now that he has the wind behind him, and he has strong evidence that his message is in fact shifting the ground of British politics, he's full of confidence, and it was a brilliant speech. He made a number of speeches like that, which were televised at the beginning of the election campaign, and that had an electrifying effect on the campaign.
All right, so Leo, one of the many things he said is that he pushed for a radically different and alternative economic position to that of the current government. Can you discuss some of the policies Corbyn pushed for?
Yeah, they're laid out in the Labour Party manifesto, but to some extent he went further. He only mentioned in passing what had been stressed earlier in the week by other shadow ministers, but the most important of which is a public investment bank, a national one, supplemented by regional investment banks, where the public sector, the government, would take the lead in investment, addressing the fact that everywhere since the 2008 crisis, there's been a recovery of profits, but not a recovery of investment. And he says that a Labour government will take the lead in that. He also says that they will renationalize some key industries, railways, water, energy, and moreover that many public services that were expanded through the public sector, through what is known as private finance initiatives, the equivalent of PPPs in North America, will be clawed back, and they've been inefficiently developed. This is hospitals, this is the NHS, this is schools, etc. So that's the centerpiece of it. It's not socialism. And those of us who wish Corbyn the best should not put ourselves in the position of imagining it's going to be easy. The reaction, even though it's not socialism, from the Confederation of British Industry, from the city, from the banks, have already been, oh my God, this is going to undermine private enterprise. It's far from that, but they will face enormous opposition. And, we shouldn't put the kind of emphasis on what they can immediately achieve that would lead us to then be disappointed in a way we were when Syriza was elected in Greece. We need to realize their limitations. And when he says we're ready, you just had him quoted as saying we're ready for government. They're not ready. Who could be ready to take on the kind of powers that be? And they haven't built yet, although they've as he said, massively shifted the center ground of British politics. That was the most important element of his speech. He isn't yet ready. They haven't built the base in the Labour Party branches, in the trade unions, to win the kind of support from people when, if I can use the expression, the crap will hit the fan. When all of the opposition to even these relatively moderate attempts to increase the state's public sector role in the economy will be opposed by both foreign and domestic capital.
Now, Leo, in his speech, he mentioned the word Brexit almost 15 times. This is a part of what he had to say.
As democratic socialists, we accept and respect the referendum result. But respect for a democratic decision does not mean giving a green light to recklessness. Tory Brexit agenda that would plunge Britain into a Trump-style race to the bottom in rights and corporate taxes.
Did Corbyn outline any concrete differences between a Brexit led by Labour Party and that of the Tories?
Yes, he said explicitly, we will not blame immigrants for the economic problems of Britain. He said that very explicitly and laid it on the Tories for making that kind of argument. He said leaving Europe is not about leaving the European economy. What it is about is removing the restrictions that a neoliberal Europe would put on the type of public sector interventions, investment that they're trying to talk about. And obviously what he is doing is, and he has enormous space to do it now, walking a tightrope, speaking to those who rejected Europe, but not speaking to them in a way that rejects Europe because of migration, labor migration, but rejects Europe because it's neoliberal. At the same time, he needs to speak to those who want to remain, who are internationalists. He said very explicitly that Europeans now living in Britain will be given the full rights of British citizens. And he said that it was the Labour Party that had been arguing for a long transition period, which May has now adopted. So he's appealing to both sides, and he's in a perfect position to do so. This is one of the reasons Labour did so well in the election.
Leo, Corbyn made a very important statement about how the party should position itself. Let's listen.
Conference, it's often said that elections can only be won from the centre ground. And, all right, in a way, that's not wrong, so long as it's clear that the political centre of gravity isn't fixed or unmovable. Nor is it where the establishment pundits like to think it is, because they know everything, as you know. It shifts as people's expectations and experiences changed, and political space is opened up.
Leo, what did he mean by that? Elections can be only won from centre ground.
What he says is that's not wrong, so long as it's clear that the center ground isn't fixed forever or unmovable. And you know, this is exactly what the Real News's position is. The mainstream media treats the center ground as though it is something fixed. It's the status quo, it's the current consensus. And the whole point about being a socialist politician is to believe that you can influence people, that you can make socialists, that you can show them that socialist policy, socialist ideas, socialist vision is in their interests. As Tony Benn once said when he was asked what he wanted to do as a politician, he said, I want to make socialists. Now, you know, most politicians, of course, run away from that. But, you know, Corbyn says what we've managed to do is offer people a clear choice. Because we've done that, politics has finally caught up with the crash of 2008. In a sense, that's what Trump did. It's, of course, what Bernie did. The difference is that where Bernie didn't win the Democratic Party, Corbyn did, and he's proving that this can be effective. In fact, Hillary Clinton, in her appalling book, has a passage at the end that admits that Sanders was right in this respect.
Right. And finally, Leo, in terms of foreign policy, Corbyn had this to say.
But we also know that terrorism is thriving in a world that, frankly, our governments have helped to shape, with its failed states, military interventions and occupations. Where millions of people are forced to flee conflict or hunger. We have to do better and swap the knee-jerk response of another bombing campaign for long-term help to solve the conflicts rather than fuel them.
All right, Leo, so this is a real departure from usual Labour Party positioning on terrorism and, of course, war and the UK's role in all of this. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think, to be fair, Ed Miliband already distanced himself from the Blairite support of the Bush invasion of Iraq, which is at the source of much of this. And that's why he was elected leader. Corbyn carried that much further. And before the election, you may remember, there was an appalling terrorist bombing in Manchester at a concert where many young people were killed. And Corbyn's response to that was exactly what he just said in that speech. And many people thought, oh, well, that's going to kill the Labour Party. Not at all. And it shows that what I was saying that was most important in the speech, that you can shift the center ground, is in fact true. And that's what he did, speaking to people in a way that led them to understand that our policies, our foreign policies, our imperialist foreign policies, are often at the root of the chaos that is the modern capitalist world. So that was very effective. But he said other things as well that are very significant, not least of which he pointed to the appalling situation of the Palestinians, the need for a two-state solution. And in a context where he has been attacked for being an anti-Semite, and the Labour Party was defensive of that. And that is not, he's the furthest thing from an anti-Semite. He doesn't have a racist bone in his body. But the attack was simply because he's prepared to speak to Palestinian rights and the need for a two-state solution, and is therefore called an anti-Semite. And rather than back off, he repeated that. That was courageous, that was important. That was perhaps the most important thing that was in that foreign policy speech. I must say, Miliband, who's Jewish, was also called an anti-Semite. So this is a very, very important departure. The other important thing was that he took such a great distance and was so critical at some length of Trump's speech at the United Nations, and called on the British government to condemn it. They've only done so in a mealy-mouthed way. So that, too, was a very, very important element of that speech.
And overall, Leo, how does this position Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn as its leader going forward?
It positions them very well, but provided that it lights a fire under the young activists, under the momentum people, to go ahead and, in fact, turn Labour Party branches into centers of working class life, into arenas where people, when they're in trouble, go looking for help, where they learn how to do politics themselves, how to engage in democracy. It's important, if the unions are moved to put their money where their mouth is, to hire organizers to engage in the political mobilization and education of their members behind a radical, and I'd say even more radical, program than Labour is now pushing, because it is going to have to be more radical in the face of the opposition that it's going to run into from both domestic and international capital.
All right, Leo, I thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to having you back, because I think the Labour Party will only continue to gain momentum.
Great to talk to you, Sharmini, especially about this.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.